take a newspaper with a scary headline that's 5 or 10 years old, laminate it. And so when a client comes in and says, I'm so scared about the panic du jour, to bring that paper out and go,
what's some big stuff we should be thinking about moving into 2025?
Accenture came out with a study and they said, what are you looking for out of your relationship with your advisor? Number one answer was someone who...
Advisors, as we move into the future, there are skills that we need to keep developing and improving to give us a better chance of success as we grow our business. And Dr. Daniel Crosby, the New York Times bestselling author, he came on the channel to share a few ideas and how we could learn this and apply these skills with our clients. So this is a short talk. We talk a little bit about his new book, The Soul of Wealth, which he actually wrote for advisors. But there's a lot of practical knowledge in there. And if you end up liking this, because it was so short, let me know if you want to have a longer conversation with him, and then I'll get him back on the channel and talk some more. But hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Daniel Crosby. So Dr. Daniel Crosby, thanks for being here. I read this book, The Soul of Wealth. Actually, I have a few chapters left, which is fantastic for any advisor who has not read it yet. It's such an easy read. I think, like I told you before, I think I took notes on almost every page through the mind of talking to clients. So I'm mainly working with retirees. There's so much practical advice. And at the end of a lot of the chapters, you just say, here's the practical application. So advisors, use this. We're going to touch on a few things here, but I wanted to just get your take. You've been doing this a long time. You speak at all these conferences, you write all these books. Let's just talk about anything as we're talking to advisors. What's some big stuff we should be thinking about moving into 2025? As we're growing our businesses, as we're creating better relationships with clients?
Yeah, so I'll just thank you for your thoughtful read of the book. I'm super proud of it, and advisors are really loving it. So that's who it was written for, and for advisors to share with their clients. So I'm glad it's finding its target. But I want to talk about just sort of the future of human first advice. I want to look at it from a couple of angles. The first is, why do we get hired? A couple years ago, Accenture came out with a study and they said, what are you looking for out of your relationship with your advisor? Number one answer was someone who gets me, someone who understands me. Number two answer is someone with whom I share values. The number three answer is someone effectively I could hang with socially. And it is extraordinary to look at that list of characteristics that people are looking for and to see the total conspicuous absence of anything technical or analytical. And I think the reason why that is not because it's not important. It is. It's because that stuff is easily vetted. Like, you can see, do they have letters behind their name? Do they have good Google reviews? Did a friend, recommend them to me? Do they have years of experience? And, this is not brain surgery. If someone, ticks those boxes, they're probably good. They're probably doing what they need to do from a technical perspective. After that, it all becomes about relationships. So we get hired as an industry for largely relational reasons. If we look at why we get fired, 87% of advisors who get fired by their clients get fired for the lack of relationship or lack of communication. Only 13% fire their advisors for technical, investment performance or sort of technical reasons. And yes, that 13% are a nightmare to work with. That 13% are tough to work with anyway, right? And then, so we get hired for relational reasons, we get retained for relational reasons. And if you even look at where we add the most value, in 2016, Merrill Lynch did a meta-analysis. So this is a study of all the studies on where advisors add value to their clients' lives. The good news is every single part of an advisor's day, every part of their value stack was additive, from tax alpha to product selection, asset allocation, all of it's additive. It's all good stuff. And people who work with advisors have really wonderful outcomes by and large. But if you look at the things that were most additive, the number one most additive piece was behavioral coaching, 144 basis points on average of added value per year. Compare that to asset management, which is 36 or something basis points a year. It's 8 times as much. And so we're hired on behavior. we're fired for lack of sort of behavior, and we add value through behavior. So, a book like The Soul of Wealth, which is all about the psychology of money and the human side of money and meaning and money and purpose and money and happiness. That's really the whole ballgame. That is what we do. And I think in the age of AI, when AI is going to come and, commoditize to an even greater extent the technical aspects of our job, this is where we're going to add value in the future, is the human side.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The expertise. So search and knowledge was kind of commoditized with Google. Expertise is not there yet, but getting more and more commoditized and will be most likely with AI. But one thing that will be harder is to commoditize wisdom and kind of that experience and that crystallized intelligence, like Arthur Brooks talks about. So leaning into that, I love that, and I love that's why, yeah, studying this book is so big. How do we talk about behavioral coaching without saying behavioral coaching? Because if I'm talking to a client and saying, "Hey, one of the things my value is behavioral coaching," I don't need coaching on my behavior. What are you talking about? How can I bring that up? How can advisors bring that up, or is it just in the conversations that they have?
Yeah, you don't. I mean, is the short answer. So if you look at first of all, behavioral coaching sounds like you're a dog whisperer or something. And I mean, it sounds so Pavlovian and so rudimentary. I mean, for you and I and the advisors listening to talk about it, that's fine. Like, we know what we're saying. But to the average client, that leaves them very cold. And when you look at Morningstar, Morningstar has done great research on this, where they ask people, we know what's most additive. I just told you, right? It's the behavioral coaching piece. But when you ask clients, what does your advisor do for you that you appreciate the most? They have responses. The number one response is something like, talks to me and helps me reach my goals, right? Well, that's behavioral coaching too.
Mm.
But the last answer is the sort of the most overtly behavioral one. The least endorsed answer is like the one that helps me not make stupid mistakes and be emotional, kind of.
Mhm.
People don't conceptualize of themselves as irrational and emotional and all the things that candidly we know that they are. But that's not how people see themselves, and they're not looking for you to fix it. It also heightens the power differential and sort of puts a wedge or a gap between advisor and client. I liken it to what I used to do with my kids, which is I would put vegetables and desserts, right? Like, I would like mix up broccoli and brownies or beans and brownies and things like that. And you don't go, here, eat your veggies. You go, here, eat this brownie. And so behavior is going to be woven into every part of your practice, right? Like, behavioral human first considerations should absolutely permeate every part of your practice. And you should also never call them.
Yeah.
It should never be open up and get some vegetables. We talked on our previous segment about something like a bucketing strategy. You know, a bucketing strategy is the most sensible thing in the world to the client who already engages in mental accounting and is doing these things anyways. You don't have to tell them about mental accounting. You don't have to tell them that bucketing brings about sort of better investor outcomes. You can just know that and do it. So simultaneously, every part of your practice should be behavioral, and no part should be overtly behavioral.
I know we got just a few minutes left. One of the practical things I heard you say that's every advisor could do, and I thought it was a light bulb moment for me at least, was there's a chapter in the book about some mental models. We don't have to walk through all the mental models. I'll at least say the page 124, where we're looking at all the negative news coming at us, the worry and the fear and all the things that clients feel and how we have to help them and talk them through things. That's a great 2 pages for advisors. One of the things you talked about was the laminating or just the examples of news articles from 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. Can you kind of walk through that just in a couple minutes of what that?
Yeah. Yeah, the idea for this actually came. I'm a clinical psychologist by education, even though I've spent my whole career working with advisors. When I was in my graduate school training, my first rotation was at an eating disorder clinic, helping young women with eating disorders. And, I'm all of 23 years old when I'm doing this. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? How is this going to work? And where will we start? The first thing that they taught these young women to do was to be informed consumers of the messages that are given to women about beauty and their appearance. And it was so empowering. It wasn't nutritional counseling, it wasn't therapy. It was, look how you're marketed to, look how they try to make you feel bad, how they airbrush, how they use lighting, how they lie, how they try and make you feel small, to feel bad about yourself. And becoming an informed consumer of that media diet was so empowering. So that's a lot of what I'm talking about in those pages that you mentioned. Understanding the motivations behind why what bleeds leads, and helping our clients understand that. Helping our clients understand that environment is a better predictor of behavior than goals. I think a lot of times we go, oh, I have this goal to stay the course and be a long-term investor. Well, that's great. Everyone does, right? Like everyone has that goal, but guess who's able to do it? It's the people who turn off the news, right? It's the people who turn off that scary cable financial news. With respect to the specific tactic you talked about, this is something I got from Orion's chief investment officer, Tim Holland, is the first one who gave me this idea. So shout out to him. To take a newspaper with a scary headline that's 5 or 10 years old and, laminate it. And so when a client comes in and says, wow, I'm so scared about the panic du jour, to bring that paper out and go, hey, COVID strikes fear across the world or whatever, like world economy shut down, from 5 years ago. Say, hey, are you still worried about that? Right? Well, no, of course not. And like, what has the market done in the interim? And how much have you profited by not worrying that
Mm.
anymore? And like, is what you're worried about today worse than COVID, which shut down the entire world economy for a prolonged period of time? I promise you it's not. And so just giving them that sort of visceral perspective about the things you're worried about today are very unlikely to matter 5 years from now, let alone 50 years from now. And I think that's just sort of a practical way to give them that perspective.
I love that. I'll have to have you back on because there's so many other questions, helpful things for advisors, but I know we gotta jump off. Thanks for writing the book. Advisors, I would pick it up, The Soul of Wealth, and get ready to take some notes on this. So thank you, Dr. Daniel Crosby.
Thanks, Dave.